evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you, Mr. Neighbor. Night, Neighbor, and the viewers and everyone. Blessed evening.
Let me turn this up a little. Okay, I'm all the way up. Scratchy, the situation here seemed to be deepening with the Jamaica Labour Party today suggesting that Japton may be partly responsible for funding the People's National Party campaign. Is that a concern to you, or is this par for the course? We support our friends in politics. Nothing corrupt here.
Neighbor, it should definitely be of concern, neighbor. When you have companies, neighbor, private companies that are benefiting, neighbor, from we don't want to be tax exempt from a government standpoint, neighbor, and then supporting political organization, neighbor. Those things are definitely of concern, neighbor. Will it go, how far will it go, or what type of repercussion will be done for it? That's a different argument, but anybody who consider themselves well-thinking Jamaicans, neighbor, anyone who consider themselves to be someone with some form of morality will definitely neighbor say that yes, it definitely have some form of concern.
Okay, because people don't just invest in political party campaigns just like that. They do expect that should the party win, some benefits would accrue back to them. Isn't that so?
Definitely, neighbor. When most organizations, neighbor, donate to political organization, neighbor, it is definitely, neighbor, with the interest, neighbor, of getting back something if that political organization should find victory at any election polls. They definitely.
Okay. Now, I frame this, you see, Scratchy, as a gamble that Golding has taken, which means that he is not wanting to throw his colleague under the bus, but at the same time, he's not distancing himself away, because this move, whatever he does, could cost the party some amount of unity and could cost the party some amount of, there can be challenges inside there if he doesn't act properly. Eh?
Definitely, neighbor. I think that a lot of persons within the PNP, neighbor, will definitely look at the leader, neighbor, with some form of skepticism, neighbor, look at him from a level because of how the leader handled this situation. Again, neighbor, the People's National Party has always been a political organization that puts the best interest of the PNP over the best interest of Jamaica, neighbor. And I think one of the biggest blunder was a statement that came from the opposition leader, neighbor. A very, very stupid statement. A statement, neighbor, that caused some more questions than answers. A statement that kind of let us see the leader of the opposition, neighbor, for who he truly is. And a statement, neighbor, that have us to wonder, neighbor, if the leader of the opposition, neighbor, when he goes around and talking about he's the integrity boss, if that had any meaning, it was just a baseless statement, because that statement that coming from the opposition leader, neighbor, and the things that was said in that statement, it goes to show, neighbor, that the opposition neighbor leader, neighbor, is far from the reality of what is the issue right here, talking about any discounted costs to these dialysis machines and stuff like that. Those are total madness. You're bypassing the bigger picture of an act that is considered corrupted, an act that MOCA, our major investigation task force, is asked to look into, what was committed. So to come and talk about dialysis machine and the price and stuff like that, you're bypassing the bigger picture and looking at something that is much more smaller. And I think that is very wrong from the opposition leader, neighbor. And as I say, it can definitely create some problem, neighbor, within the organization. I think there's a lot of question. Was Jack then? I agree with Jamaica Labour Party. We should have to wonder, it was Jack then one of those organizations where the PNP borrow funding from to run their political campaign, as to why they are so loyal to Mr. Garden. And when you look at even Mr. Garden, neighbor, what is going on in the PNP, Mr. Garden is not considered himself as a riser. Mr. Garden is someone who stood with Mr. Peter Phillips, Dr. Peter Phillips, over the years. He's a successor of Mr. Peter Phillips in that constituency. So for you say Mark Jefferson Golding and the PNP to come out in the defense of Mr. Garden so strong, neighbor, something else is behind this, neighbor. that is much more further than what we are seeing, because Mr. Garden is not no political giant. Mr. Garden is not no political wizard, no one who the parliament cannot do without, or something like that. He's a new member of parliament. So I think for Mark Golding able to put his reputation and reputation of the PNP for Mr. Garden, something deeper, much deeper, neighbor, is behind this, and we need those answers to those deeper questions.
Yes. This moment, Scratchy, is a mirror, because we do not just see the facts laid bare before us, but we see the soul of Mr. Golding's leadership. And Scratchy, would you be concerned in this revelation that Golding would manage the country like P.J. Patterson, where ethics, morals, and value don't come into his decision? It's about the law, the shield of the law. Wasn't that how P.J. argued? Everything was about the shield of the law. No law was broken. Does this not say something about how Golding would kind of govern the country? Is it concerning to you?
Neighbor, it would definitely be concerning to me, neighbor, because despite here we know, neighbor, the law, neighbor, is where the buck stops, neighbor. But despite where the law stands, neighbor, each of us as individuals, neighbor, we have some form of moral, neighbor, responsibility, where we, where despite where the law might not come, or where the law might not be strike, or where the law might not strike, neighbor, it is us to look into ourselves, neighbor, from a moral standpoint, and see where we have blundered, and see where we have gone wrong, and just make a moral decision by taking ourselves away, or make a decision that is in the best interest of Jamaica and not your political organization itself. So yes, neighbor, the PNP, PJ did it, neighbor, no law was broken. Mark Jefferson Golding did it, neighbor, the same thing again, neighbor. Mark Golding, when he was asked, neighbor, to renounce his British citizenship, neighbor, he was saying, he went around on media, all the media was saying that he did not break any law, but he didn't realize that it wasn't a matter of breaking any law, it was a matter of morality, vying for the highest office in the land, making sure that your allegiance is only to a Jamaica. We don't want to know that we have a prime minister who swear to have an allegiance to any other foreign powers. So he didn't see it from that standpoint. All he could see was the law, whether it is within the law, whether it is within the law. We have seen, neighbor, we are on more than one occasion, neighbor, where the Jamaica Labour Party has taken a different approach. Case in point, when you look at Dalrymple Filbert, neighbor, Dalrymple Filbert was charged, neighbor, by the Integrity Commission. She went to court, she pleaded guilty, and she pleaded her fine, neighbor. She didn't have to resign as a member of parliament, neighbor. She could have just stepped away from whatever position she held. But to make it the point much stronger, neighbor, from a moral standpoint, she stepped aside, neighbor, as a member of parliament as well, to kind of ease the process and ease the pressure and ease any backlash that was to come at the governing party at that time, and it was in the best interest of Jamaica at that time. She came back, and yes, her constituency voted for her. We can't fight against that, because her constituency voted for her back to come back in the government. But the PNP, neighbor, has always governed different from the Jamaica Labour Party. And I think that Mark Golding type of leadership, neighbor, is one of the most distasteful leadership style that we have seen. It's one of the most inappropriate leadership style that we have seen. One of the most, I would say, neighbor, unprofessional leadership style that we have seen going on in Jamaica for a very long time. And how he brands himself as the integrity boss and stuff like that, neighbor. And as I said, neighbor, this is not something new, neighbor. When you have an opposition party in power, and while you're in opposition, you're still in things that in corrupt act. You're in opposition, but there are corruption that are still calling upon your neighbor. This goes to show, neighbor, the type of opposition party that we have and the type of leader of the opposition party that we have, neighbor. And I'm not, my biggest concern, neighbor, is that well-thinking Jamaicans, neighbor, are not out there, neighbor, putting out these points, these pain points, neighbor, highlighting all of Mark Golding mishaps, highlighting where Mark Golding is mishapping. A simple platform like yours or us here and TikTok, neighbor, we can come here day to day and try to highlight whatever wrongs or whatever flaws we saw in Mr. Mark Golding's pronouncement, neighbor, in his statement or in his action, neighbor, and call it out. It's just a shame that persons who are being paid handsomely, persons who are being seen as celebrity, persons who are being held at certain level in our society, neighbor, they can't do the same. And that is why Jamaica is in the situation that it is in, neighbor, because of the bias and the political allegiance that some of our persons who are supposed to call out these things take to these political organizations. It is just so sad, because Mark Golding, neighbor, and that statement that he put out yesterday, neighbor, every single media house should be flagging that statement and pointing out all the mishaps and everything where Mark Jefferson Golding went wrong, but they are not. They rather be silent on it.
Yeah, it concerns me, Scratchy, and I want you to double down on it a little bit, because the truth of the matter is that 10 years ago, a statement like this would have been reported in the media and left alone. The man did nothing wrong. But in truth and in fact, it's a disingenuous statement, Scratchy, because what it does, it holds up the law as a moral shield. It's like you know, you are it's not against, you're not against having five women, but it doesn't make that right. The act itself is one of morality, of integrity, Scratchy, and that is the real question here. The question is that someone in public life used their influence or their authority or whatever to benefit in a way that ought not to have been done. That is not about it being legal, Scratchy. It is about it being wrong. The state's purse was deprived of millions of dollars. That is the story.
That is the story, neighbor, and that is where Mark Golding and the PNP and all the supporters and surrogates of the people to be here and look at it from a different level and think that because no laws or it is not of a legal standpoint that then Mr. Gardner did nothing wrong. As I said, neighbor, you bypass a key sector. You bypass the taxes that were supposed to be went into the coffers of this country. You bypass that. So once you bypass that on a company that you are using these things that you brought in to gain personal profits, to benefit yourself personally, you must be accountable. You must stand accountable. So morality must come in play. And the reason why, the neighbor, when I see like I live in a country, neighbor, where we here in this country where I live, neighbor, I see politicians resign for the least thing, neighbor. The least of thing on a politician have to step aside, neighbor. But the reason why politicians are so difficult, neighbor, to step away in Jamaica, neighbor, is because this is morality, neighbor. Morality comes with some form of, because of the embarrassment that you're trying to save yourself from. Guys like Dennis Gardner, neighbor, despite his company being caught up in this, neighbor, he's not gonna receive any form of embarrassment, neighbor. When he goes around into certain circles, neighbor, he's not gonna see people shunning him and don't want to talk to him. Persons don't want to be seen beside him and stuff like that. Because, neighbor, we live in a country, neighbor, where persons endorse people even though people do wrong. They try to tell you that no, you don't do anything wrong. Or even if they do wrongs, neighbor, because we're based on the compassion or whatever feelings that they get from their compatriots, same way, neighbor, they don't feel like they owe anything or they did anything wrong. Neighbor, in these countries, neighbor, when you do something wrong, neighbor, it is possible you might lose friends, you might lose business opportunity, neighbor, and you might lose a whole lot. But in Jamaica, neighbor, when these politicians do anything wrong, they don't lose anything, neighbor. If they have a business that is running, neighbor, their business continue to reap success. If they have any successful friends, neighbor, they continue to be friends with these successful people. Nobody's not calling out anybody for wrongdoing. Nobody's not cutting off anybody for wrongdoing, neighbor. And something like this, neighbor, that Dennis Gardner company has done, Dennis Gardner should be receiving some form of rebuttal from a lot of persons in our society. But they are not. And that is the reason why he's so strong. That is the reason why in his response, he's putting up his rebuttal in his response. And this is the reason why when time media houses call him to reach out to him, he's so disrespectful and rude and don't want to give any form of interviews, neighbor, because this guy's not losing anything. He's not losing any business. He's not losing any friends. His social corner, his social connection is strong. The same, neighbor. And that is the problem in Jamaica, neighbor. We need to call a spade and stop look at things from green and orange. It's full time come, neighbor, for Jamaica to take that stand. We're not about green and orange. You deprive the country of millions of dollars in taxes, and you should trace some form of consequences so that it cannot be business as usual and it cannot be business as day. But as I said, neighbor, they have nothing to lose, neighbor. I said it last night. Removing Dennis Meadows from the PAC, Dennis Meadows don't lose nothing. That is Dennis Gardner, Removing Dennis Gardner from the PAC, him don't lose nothing. Removing Dennis Gardner as a shadow person from the shadow cabinet, him don't lose nothing, neighbor. Come month 10, Dennis Gardner is still going to receive his salary, neighbor. There's nothing that this guy loses as a result of that, neighbor. So whatever investigation is going on right now, we'll just have to sit and wait and see how far this investigation go. Because I am of the belief, neighbor, that whatever tax exempt or whatever was given to Dennis Gardner, my key question that I want to know is, How did Mr. Dennis Garden come by it? Did he use his influence? Did any other person in the PNP who is connected to use their influence? Was it a bribe? It was $10 million in taxes that you bypassed. Did you pay a lesser fund to anyone who have access to granting you this waiver to these persons? So you got that tax waiver. These are questions that we need answers for, neighbor. And I just want the investigation to go further and see how best it go. But I strongly believe, neighbor, that the PAC and being removed as the shadow spokesperson or shadow spokesperson and from the cabinet, that doesn't do nothing, neighbor. That don't do nothing for Mr. God. That don't stop nothing. Mr. God is not losing anything there, neighbor. And I think in something like this that is so serious, neighbor, this is the same guy, you know. When time this investigation was going on earlier and before his name was publicly made, persons who had the opportunity to see the report or hear about the report, neighbor, knew that Jotlin was a part of it. This guy wrote at his lawyers, neighbor, wrote media houses, neighbor, to silence them, neighbor, telling them that they were supposed to shut up because it's madness them talking. When this guy must have knew all along what was going on with his company. So this neighbor, this guy, this is not a normal thing. And I don't think that Dennis Garden, neighbor, should get away from anything like this. An investigation, yes, guilty until proven innocent until proven guilty, but at the time being, I believe that more should be done from this neighbor. I don't want to see this guy sitting in the parliament. Come Tuesday, this guy shouldn't be a part of the parliamentary process. This guy shouldn't stand and talk or give any input or output at any being. That is my point, neighbor. I don't think whatever he step aside from, neighbor, is sufficient enough or match whatever this guy has done or whatever mishap this guy business place is being called into. It don't match it, neighbor. Stepping away from the PSC, you don't lose anything. Stepping away from the shadow cabinet, you don't lose anything. You still receive your salary and everything same way.
Okay. Scratchy, the People's National Party is struggling, in my view, in the society to break free from the perception of nepotism, accountability, and all of that. Many are saying they are not a credible alternative. How do you think that the handling of this matter will impact the PNP in the medium term? We don't have an election for 3-4 years down the road. How do you think that they will be impacted in the medium term? If this was close to an election, it would have been a different kettle of fish. But for right now, how do you see it playing politically for the party?
Well, neighbor, right now, neighbor, from a standpoint, neighbor, it's not gonna look good, neighbor. But the reason why it's gonna look good to them, neighbor, because persons who are gonna come out boldly, neighbor, and speak out against whatever is going on within the PNP, neighbor, are persons, neighbor, who support the Jamaica Labour Party. And it is going to look political when time persons like that come out and speak. It's going to just look like, okay, we don't have to worry ourselves. A Labour right alone against what we are doing. So we don't have to worry ourselves. That is what they are doing, neighbor, because they know how tribal or the political landscape is, neighbor. Well-thinking Jamaicans, neighbor. Jamaicans who consider themselves to be on the fence, neighbor. Jamaicans who consider themselves to be academians, neighbor. Persons like our university heads, neighbor, professors in our universities, persons who hold certain high offices, neighbor. These are the voices that you want to hear and things like these, neighbor. And it is not, if me, Scratchy, come out and say Dennis Garden must step aside, neighbor, it's going to seem political because I am seen as a strong Labour Party supporter. So it's going to look political. They're not going to see anything else that I'm saying more than Scratchy is a Labour, right? That's why Scratchy wants Dennis Garden to step aside. But what about the persons, neighbor, in our society who don't consider themselves to be Labour, right? Who continue to boast that they're not a Labour, right? They continue to boast that they're not PNP. Why are these persons so silent in matters of these? Why we can't hear in times like these? Why these people can't come out and be more vocal and stuff like this and say, okay, based on what is going on, we are not PNP, we always say we are not PNP, we always say we are not Labour, right? But we don't like this that is going on and we don't like that what is going on. We are not seeing that, neighbor, and that is where Jamaica is losing, that is where Jamaica is sinking, neighbor. the well-thinking Jamaicans and the persons who are at the top of the level, neighbor, they are not speaking out. They are silent. And the constant silence and the deafening silence from these guys, neighbor, is why corruption continues to strive, is why there is still a place for corruption in Jamaica, and is why a person like Dennis Gordon, neighbor, put morality aside, neighbor, and tend to talk about legality, because there's no one to hold these persons from a moral standpoint. Persons silent, neighbor. When you look at all of these heads of departments, heads of agencies, we have universities, chancellors, and we have professors. These are well-thinking Jamaicans who know right from wrong. And I don't think if you come out and call out Dennis Gordon in whatever is going on right now, or call out Jack Den and the process that Jack Den went through with the university as well as West Indies, I don't think that will be political. And these are the voices that we want to hear in our society, neighbor. They are silent. And that is why Jamaica is suffering, neighbor, from corruption, from this high level of corruption, from an opposition party. And a lot of persons might not see the importance of this, neighbor. But when you have an opposition party in power, and this opposition party is still in corruption, the names is still being called in acts of corruption, neighbor, that is that is something very serious. Because imagine if you were the governing party, if you are in opposition and you have the ability and you have access to bypass government taxes, that means something is seriously wrong. Imagine if you were in power. How long? When time there was the 2011 to 2016 period, when time the PNP was in power. We should go back. We should find some audit to go all the way back to that time and find out how the Jack then was about those time, how the Jack then benefit from that PNP government. You know, there's a lot that need to be sorted out. There's a lot that need to come out of this, neighbor. And a lot of persons might look at this and saying, okay, Scratchy, we have seen bigger corruption than this. We are the KSAC with the Mayor Swaby down there, neighbor. We don't see nothing come off of that dead and gone right now. We are the Spanish Town, $1 billion missing. We are the Mandeville Parish, Manchester Parish Council, $400 million missing. We don't hear nothing about that, neighbor. It is too easy, neighbor, for when politicians are involved in acts of corruption, neighbor. It sweep underneath the table, neighbor. Look at the Jamaica Labour Party. Royal Reid, neighbor, right now is before the court for acts of corruption, allegation of corruption. Other members of the party, neighbor, was removed from their post, neighbor, because of acts of corruption. So, neighbor, some serious thing need to be done from the PNP standpoint, neighbor. Well-thinking Jamaicans need to call out the PNP, neighbor, and stop the bias. I don't care about civil society, neighbor. Because this is not civil society. Nothing about that society, those groups are civil, neighbor. So I don't expect them to come out and call out nothing, because as I say, a lot of these groups were formed in the 1990s under the People's National Party. A lot of these groups, neighbor, they tend to believe that whenever the PNP is in power, they get more state funding from the government whenever the PNP in power. So I see civil society groups more as proxy groups for the PNP, neighbor. But I can tell you, neighbor, as long as it is the G2K, as long as it is the Jamaica Labour Party, and as long as it is us and these TikTok platforms who call ourselves JLP bloggers, who continue to come out and speak about what is going on with Dennis Meadows, Dennis Gordon, and Jack the neighbor, it is not going to go nowhere. As sad as it sounds, it is not going to go nowhere, because we are seen as political activists. We are seen as taking a political side. So once we are labor rights and we brand ourselves as labor rights and we come out and talk about this, it is not going to go nowhere, neighbor. Well-thinking Jamaicans who own a lot of these organizations, a lot of these companies, a lot of these universities, the chancellors, the professors, these are the persons, neighbor, who are supposed to come out and call a spade, whether it will fall and make one party look good, or it will make one party look good. Just look bad. You're standing up in the best interest of Jamaica. And we have too many persons in this country, neighbor, who are failed to stand up in the best interest of Jamaica. They stand up in the best interest of PNP most of the time, neighbor. And that is why Jamaica was failing. That is why Jamaica was suffering. That is why you see crime risen to the level what it was in the neighbor. You think crime, there's no community in Jamaica, neighbor, that have more gunmen than law-abiding citizens. But why crime could rise so? Because the law-abiding citizens, they were afraid, or they didn't come out and speak up about what is going wrong, neighbor. Neighbor, bad can only prevail when the good remain silent. And that is what is going on in Jamaica right now. Too many persons or too many people who consider themselves to be good. They are silent whenever acts of corruption occur, whenever bad come about. And that is why Dennis Garden and the Jatden group of companies and all the others who benefited from this tax exempt neighbor can continue neighbor to strive and will continue to make large profit and huge profits year after year neighbor, because we don't believe in letting persons pay for whatever mishaps they do neighbor by boycotting Jatden neighbor, whatever service. Jatden is not the only one that offer these services. Boycott them neighbor before them service that they do, because it was bleeding the taxpayers of Jamaica neighbor. Neighbor, this is not just a PNP or JLP thing in the neighbor. This is the reason why a lot of Jamaicans don't want to go to the polls, neighbor.
Yes.
Because too many times, neighbor, we have seen where politicians...
We have too many people who have lost faith.
Faith.
The political system.
Exactly.
Because of the repeated acts, Scratchy.
Exactly, sir.